My name is Mark Johnson. I am Chief Growth Officer and Head of Data and Analytics at the executive level at a company called Co-Strategics. I'm also the North American Editorial Board Chair and visionary co-founder of CDO Magazine. Today, I have the distinct honor and privilege of interviewing Alex Hesterberg, who is CEO of Superna. Alex, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Mark. Really happy to be here. Greatly appreciate you making the time.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Alex, and then tell us a little bit about Superna before we get into the discussion?
Sure. So I've been in infrastructure tech now for over 25 years. And I believe you and I even crossed paths at the turn of the century back in the Veritas days. I've been super privileged to work in a few different areas and seen the data resiliency and security perspective from a few different companies. And that's what brought me to Superna.
Awesome. And you mentioned Veritas Software, and back in the day, I recall your time in that role at the company was really pretty defining for the industry. As we now talk about Superna, though, and what your focus is, can you give us a little thumbnail on where that's all evolved to and what Superna is solving for?
Yeah, so Superna itself is not a new company. It's been around a little over 14 years. It had focused on building data resiliency and data security products, initially for the EMC Isilon platform. Now, after the Dell acquisition, it's called PowerScale. And this was the primary route to market for Superna, where thousands and thousands of customers were purchasing their failover and resiliency capability, but also their next generation real-time data security. And it was the company that first introduced this kind of capability over 7 years ago. And since then, we have over 3,000 customers globally who have been relying on resiliency and security capability from Superna. And we've done very well getting incredible feedback from these customers on the investments we've made over the last couple of years.
Oh, quite interesting. Well, security teams have invested heavily in network and endpoint defense, and security budgets have never been higher, yet breaches are increasing. What's being missed?
Yeah, so if you look at sort of the industry we grew up in, right, the data teams and the storage teams have often been either siloed or segmented from the security teams. It was traditionally network and eventually identity that were the focus areas for the security organizations. The data and storage teams didn't really have any kind of connection into the security event or incident response technologies. And so the closest thing to security within the data and storage layer ended up becoming backup. And so when people think about security and data and storage, they think natively of backup. But the reality is what security tools do today and how security teams are outfitted to handle an event are very different than the concept of a recovery and a rebuild. So there was a gap there. And Superna was one of these companies that leaned in early to close that gap.
That's very interesting. CISOs own security and CDOs own data. So where does the data security fit in between these two roles today?
That's the spot. You nailed the gap. So right now, most of the security technologies out there that customers have spent millions on are looking at endpoints and devices and parts of the environment that are kind of periphery to the data and the storage. Most of those technologies don't have any connection or any awareness of what's happening at the data and storage layer. Why is that important? Because it's very rare, if ever, that any kind of an attack or an exfiltration or an encryption event is going for anything except your data. That's where the attacks are focused. So this gap has been exploited by what we would consider to be modern cybersecurity attacks and threats. And fortunately, there's been more focus on this gap over the last couple of years, particularly with Gartner. And Superna happened to be one of those companies that had brought a technology and a platform to market to address that gap.
Quite interesting. You mentioned Gartner, and Gartner rarely creates a new magic quadrant unless the problem is serious. The analysts who pushed for cybersecurity or cyber storage quadrant kept seeing the same pattern. There were just over and over repeats of these security breaches that weren't being addressed at the storage layer. And so now there's a category out there, and you guys live in it. Within that space, why did they feel the need to carve out cyber storage as its own space and not really bring cyber storage into the security domain of the Magic Quadrant family of products?
Yes. So the category, as you mentioned, is cyber storage. And there are a couple of things that are interesting about the category itself. The first of which, the analyst who created the cyber storage category was an analyst who is also the primary Magic Quadrant owner for file and object. And so has been in the data and storage and file and object space for quite some time. She was the one who recognized this gap after meeting with hundreds of customers over the course of a few years. And each one of them, if they had experienced some kind of a ransomware attack or an encryption or extortion attack, were typically showing up in a publication, in a Wall Street Journal or in some kind of news report. And as she would describe the story, she would have conversations with these customers and ask them, I just read about you in the Wall Street Journal. Like, what are you doing to protect your data? And of course, this has become exacerbated by everything from data regulations like CCPA and GDPR. But as we mentioned earlier, data is the target. No one's really coming in to try to pull out IP addresses and other things. They're trying to get to the data. So for us, this was a moment where we got close to Gartner. We better understood why they were trying to prioritize this particular category. And when each of the customers that they were interviewing responded the same way, I've got intrusion detection, I have firewall, I have antivirus, I've got backup, I got snapshots. Yet they were susceptible and had gone through a breach or an attack of some kind. That was the trigger point to create the category. It was recognized as a gap there. And so Gartner's been a great partner for us, and we've been, I think, a good partner for them, helping to frame out the capabilities of this category and really root them in security concepts like NIST and MITRE.
That makes a lot of sense. So can you tell me why enterprises assume backups equal security, and how is this leaving them exposed? What is the problem with that strategy?
So if you think about what security technologies do today, even going back to firewalls and intrusion detection and identity access management, these security capabilities, the tenets of these security capabilities are instantaneous. They're binary. Does the firewall let you just go by and then tries to sort out if you cause a problem later? No. If you don't have permission, you don't get through. Does identity access management let you assume any identity and give you access to anything? No. You are cut off from the things you're not supposed to be engaging with. This kind of binary concept and instantaneous application of policies and action have never existed at the storage layer. It was always, we had an issue. So the issue was almost unavoidable. We had it, and now we're recovering. We had a backup, so now we recover. And it was the way we operated as an industry for decades because there was really nothing else there. And for a really long time, we were able to operate that way because the security threats that have evolved and become much more aggressive, much more caustic, much more quiet are happening every single day. So that gap has been exploited and exposed, and it's one of the reasons why I was that excited to join Superna.
I've had the pleasure today, everyone, of spending time with Alex Hesterberg, CEO of Superna, and this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for tuning in, and Alex, thank you for being our guest.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate the time.